From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. This is a special edition of Conservative Roundtable being broadcast from Panama City, Panama. And we have a guest who shares many things in his background with me. We're both from Massachusetts. Even though it's the heart of liberalism, and neither of us is a liberal, we love Boston and get back as often as we can. Ed Hall is with an organization called Maritime Protective Services. He's director of operations. And in this job, he has offices in Nigeria, in the United Kingdom, and in Athens, Greece. His home is in Florida. He's very much involved in the battle against terrorism, and he's very knowledgeable about what is happening in terms of various threats to the security of the United States. One of the things that Ed and I have been talking about today is the threat from communist China. But before we get to that, Ed, tell me about your company. What does it do, and how did you get involved in it?
Well, Maritime Protective Services was born out of the tragedies of 9/11. After the 9/11, the IMO, which is International Maritime Organization, decided to put a code together based on SOLAS, an amendment to SOLAS. SOLAS, is safety of life at sea, was the codes that went into effect after the Titanic tragedy. After the 9/11 tragedy, SOLAS recognized the problems within the maritime industries and security and decided to put the ISPS code into effect. We were born out of that. My background and the founder's background was based in security and military. The director of our UK offices, 33 and 28 years respectively with the Special Boat Services. I was in the Air Force. I was a survival specialist for the Air Force, involved in interrogation and counterintelligence. When the ISPS code was enacted, they were given 2 years to implement it. And we formed a company that helped port facilities, shipping companies, and governments become compliant with the ISPS code.
How do you do that?
Basically, there is prior to the ISPS code, there were basically no rules. Yes, customs had rules with cargo that was shipping into the States, but in reality, there were ships that would leave, Europe and come to the United States, be gone for 4 days, and nobody even knew where they're at. Unlike, airliners where we know they're at every minute of the day, there are thousands upon thousands of vessels out in the world that nobody knows where they're at. They just move around.
How can we defend against possible loading of weapons and other things in those vessels?
Well, that's what the ISPS code was intended to do. It put a stringent set of guidelines in effect that all shipping companies and port facilities around the world must comply to. They must have a security plan in place. The security plan has to be audited, and it has to be approved by their flag state.
What is a flag state?
A flag state is a country that flags the vessel.
Now, many of the vessels are flagged in countries that really have nothing to do with the vessels. Liberia, for example,
flag of convenience,
is a flag of convenience. So how do you deal with that?
The IMO recognizes countries with flag of convenience, but there are more loopholes within the system. For instance, if a vessel is a Liberian flag vessel and has an approved security plan by the Liberian government, they still must implement that security plan. And once they enter into another country's territorial waters, they fall under the guidance of that country. In other words, if you have a vessel hit the United States, and even though they're Liberian flagged, the United States has a right to inspect their security plan to make sure that they are compliant.
And there are many countries which are not up to snuff, and my understanding is we do not let vessels that have disembark from those countries come onto our shores.
Absolutely. As of July 1st, 2004, every vessel and port facility on the globe was supposed to be in compliance in order to deal with vessels and facilities that were in compliance. For instance, if you're a vessel and you're coming to the United States, Greece, or any other country, and you visited a port in another country that was non-compliant, you must notify the port you're going into that you visited that port. In fact, you must show the new port you're going to the last 10 previous stops. And very easy for the port authority at the particular port you go into to recognize if one of those were not compliant. And if one of those port facilities were not compliant, that puts you at risk of not gaining entry into the facility you're going into.
If the UN Law of the Sea Treaty were to go into force, how would that affect what you do?
It really wouldn't affect what we're doing. The ISPS code all by itself is pretty tough. Understand something. When safety of life at sea, the SOLAS code went into effect after the Titanic, it took them 10 years to implement that. We've implemented a book of codes that's 3 times what was implemented with SOLAS, and we put it into effect in less than 2 years.
You're in various places. Why are you in Nigeria?
Well, in Nigeria, basically, we had gone to Nigeria. Our UK offices had contracted with a petroleum company there to assess and write security plans, which was our core businesses, for a number of offshore platforms in Nigeria. That in turn opened doors in Nigeria to help them with the security of their ports. As of now, they don't have security plans for their ports. The U.S. government has a vested interest in Nigeria. We get a lot of our gas from Nigeria. So they've actually helped facilitate us going over there and bid for the security. We're actually what they call an RSO for Nigeria, which is a recognized security organization. When it comes to security plans, you can either write the plan or you can audit the plan. In Nigeria, we're looking to audit the plans that other companies write. Just like Greece right now, we're an RSO for Greece, and we're going to do the same thing there, audit the plan.
Greece has a reputation as a great shipping nation. Mm-hmm. Aristotle, Onassis, and many others.
Yes.
And how do they feel about a company that has its origins elsewhere coming in to oversee what they're doing?
Well, most countries don't have a problem with somebody. All they want to do is make sure that they're compliant. Yeah. Keep in mind, when this went into effect July 1st of last year, the governments of the world, both especially the United States and companies like the UK, were under a lot of pressure to make sure that these vessels and facilities were compliant. So for lack of a better term, a lot of the plans were rubber stamped to push them through. But there's a loophole in the system. The plans must be audited every 12 months. And when the plan is audited, that's when they're going to identify the challenges or the deficiencies in the plan. They're also required to put the plan into practice. They're required to perform drills and exercises to implement their plan. The plan is a living document. It must grow with the facility. Everybody that works in a facility or on a vessel has to have training. What to do? What happens if this happens? Our company goes in and helps these other countries, port facilities, and shipping companies deal with the amount of regulations that are going into place and the new regulations. Our main thrust right now is training. We're working with companies and training them how to deal with the security issues at hand. It's awareness. Right now, prior to 9/11, you've got a vessel out there with 8 or 10 crew members on the vessel. Where are they from?
Yeah, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to talk about Panama and the fact that Communist China controls the container ports at both ends of the Panama Canal on the Atlantic and Pacific side.
Looking to get more.
And let's look into that closely. Please stay with us. I'll be right back with Ed Hall, right after these messages. Please join us. Hi, this is Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus. Panama is still important to the United States of America. The People's Republic of China, otherwise known as Communist China, is moving rapidly in our front yard, the Western Hemisphere. They have important commercial facilities in Freeport in the Bahamas, in Mexico, in the CARICOM nations, and certainly here in the Republic of Panama. They're about to make an attempt to take over the major ship repair facility on the Atlantic side of the canal, and it's extremely important in terms of possible terrorist threats to the canal, in terms of the drug problem, in terms of the fact that the United States Navy needs to have an open canal because it's been cut in half. We're down to fewer than 300 ships, and if that canal were closed, our security would be in grave danger. Please help the Conservative Caucus. Talk to your senators and congressmen, and thank you for your help.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Face the Truth is a production of the Conservative Caucus and is seen twice monthly on the station you are watching. We will be interviewing the movers and shakers of the pro-life movement. We hope to educate and even inspire you about what is being done in our country to protect and to promote the sanctity of life. Please watch us.
Don't miss Face the Truth with Stephen Peruka and Conservative Roundtable with Howard Phillips right here on this station every week.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips with Ed Hall, Director of Operations for Maritime Protective Services. Panama must be a real challenge for you. Talk to us about it.
Well, Panama is interesting. As you're aware, in order to do any business on the east coast of the United States or in the Caribbean basin, you must go through the Panama Canal. There's no other way around it. It's strategically located. It is basically the center of the shipping universe. It's the keys to commerce. As you mentioned before about who's controlling Panama since the United States departure, unfortunately, as you mentioned, it appears to be China. China stepped in and filled a void that the United States abandoned. It's a harsh word, but abandoned. On both ends of the canal, the cargo container business is controlled by Chinese-owned companies.
And it's not just a question of the profits they make. They're in a position to know what is in those containers. And those containers could include live terrorists, they could include bombs, they could include weapons, they could include any number of things. And if it ever gets to the point where we're in conflict with Communist China, one of the first things we'd have to do would be to take out those port facilities.
That's a mouthful, Howard. As far as China's intentions now, I think it's all about commerce.
At the moment, absolutely.
At the moment, it's commerce. But think about what commerce does. The more commerce you do, the more power you have, the more control. And make no mistakes, the byproduct of that control, byproduct of that commerce is the control.
You know, I had the privilege of knowing a great man named Walter Judd. Judd was a congressman from Minnesota, and he was a medical missionary. And during the 1930s, he would speak all over the United States about what Japan was doing, pre-positioning itself for what it regarded as an eventual conflict with the United States of America. But his warnings fell on deaf ears. And the tragedy is that today, as you say, the United States created a void which China has filled. And the leaders of our government seem utterly unmindful of the risks. We've retreated. We've moved the Southern Command, which used to be in Panama, up to Miami. We've let Communist China establish beachheads in a number of countries in the area. They have a close relationship with the Marxist Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. They're working closely with Fidel Castro. They've established relationships with the CARICOM countries, which include various Caribbean nations. What challenges does your company have in the area? What role, if any, do you play in monitoring what China does in Panama?
What we're trying to do is make sure that they stay compliant. A lot of the companies that we're dealing with outside of the United States and the European theater are fighting the compliance. It's a burden. It's a burden on their bottom line, and most countries perceive it as a U.S. regulation, when in fact it's an international regulation.
You know, the U.S. Navy is half its former size, actually less than half, down from 600 ships to 289. At a time of war, we might have to rapidly transfer vessels between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and the Chinese would be in a position to block that, especially if we're in a dispute about Taiwan. And I've been to Panama on a number of occasions, and one of the things I will never forget was having been told by a U.S. military official that a single bomb at Gatun Lake could close the canal for 3 years. And that would be disastrous, not just for the economy of Panama and the economy of the United States, but for the security of the United States.
Absolutely. And the canal is extremely vulnerable. In fact, the canal didn't even fall under the ISPS code. It's not a port facility. It's a waterway. The Panama Canal Authority opted to voluntarily comply with the ISPS code and did a very good job, one of the first to comply. The Panama Canal Authority, the ACP, has done a wonderful job with the canal.
We've never had a problem of underestimating the ability of the Panamanians to run the canal. They were trained for years. They're doing a terrific job, and I would never be critical of that. I'm just concerned that the Panama Canal treaties were violated in permitting a government other than the government of Panama or the United States to, in effect, have a stranglehold on the Panama Canal.
We left a void. The Panamanian government's a young government. They need help. They still need help. And when we left, China was willing to step in and write it
Well, they got the control, Hutchison Whampoa did, as a result of a corrupt deal. They paid off the government of Ernesto Toro Perez Valladares. There was an initial competition for control of those port facilities. Hutchison Whampoa lost. And so Valladares, after a payoff to his government, and I can say this without fear of a lawsuit because it was generally acknowledged, did it all over again, and the Communist Chinese won the bid in total violation of the rules of contracting, as well as in violation of the Panama Canal treaties. And initially, as I understand it, Hutchison Whampoa employed British nationals in order to disguise what was going on.
No more.
But it's now run by Chinese.
Chinese and Panamanians, but most of the British are no longer with the company. And as you mentioned before, they control port facilities on both ends of the canal. There's also another large player coming into play, and that's Costco, which is another Chinese company. And they've put plans in right now to build a multi-billion-dollar facility on the Caribbean side.
Yeah, and Costco is hailed as a great partner. I've read a number of the clips from the Foreign Broadcast Information Service and the people in Costco are welcomed unequivocally by the Panamanians. Now, there's also, when President Martin Torrijos met with President Bush on April 28, there was talk about widening the canal. This has been something under discussion for a while. How serious are those proposals?
I was at the Panama Maritime 7 in January, which was a conference that specifically addressed the expansion economic impact. It's going to take a tremendous amount of capital to expand.
Wouldn't it be ironic if the United States put up the money and China turned out to be the beneficiary of the widening?
Well, it would even be more remarkable if the United States allows China to do it, which I think would be more than happy to step in and finance it.
Yeah.
That would change things.
It could happen.
It very well may happen.
What is the timing?
There was no indication at the time. They're still exploring it.
We're going to have to take a break. When we come back, your company does a great many things, Maritime Protective Services, and I'd like you to tell us in the 2 minutes we have left a little bit more about what your organization does. Please stay with us. I'm Howard Phillips with Ed Hall. We'll be back right after these messages.
Hi, I'm Bill Ball and serve on the board of directors of the Conservative Caucus with Howie Phillips. I'm here with General Gordon Sumner and Howie Phillips and several others who have been asked to join them on this very important fact-finding mission. We're here to urge you to contact your senators and congressmen for support for another presence of the U.S. forces here in the canal. 70% of the population have already desired a re-entrance of the U.S. presence here in the canal, and it is so important to offset the growing communist Chinese presence in this area. Thank you for watching.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Face the Truth is a production of the Conservative Caucus and is seen twice monthly on the station you are watching. We will be interviewing the movers and shakers of the pro-life movement. We hope to educate and even inspire you about what is being done in our country to protect and to promote the sanctity of life. Please watch us.
Don't miss Face the Truth with Stephen Peruka and Conservative Roundtable with Howard Phillips right here on this station every week.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors this broadcast. This one is from Panama City, Panama. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, please check out the Conservative Caucus website, www.conservativeusa.org, or write to us, TCC, the Conservative Caucus, at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. We've been delighted to have as our guest Ed Hall, who, like your host, hails from the Bay State of Massachusetts. He's been many places since then. And he's director of operations for a very important company, a company which does work that is crucial to the security of the United States of America and, frankly, to the security of other countries. Tell us about Maritime Security Specialists. Give us a summary of all that it does, and tell us how our viewers can establish contact with you. They want more info.
Well, Maritime Protective Services, we can be seen at www.mpsint.com, which is Maritime Protective Services International.com. That will give you a pretty good overview on what's going on in the day-to-day operations of the company. One thing I failed to mention earlier, we are partnered with Maine Maritime Academy up in Maine, a very strategically located college up in Maine. we are partnered with them with all this certified training with the Coast Guard and the MTSA in the United States.
What is MTSA?
MTSA is a Maritime Transportation and Safety Act. It's basically the U.S. version of the ISBS code. It falls under Homeland Security and the U.S. Coast Guard. And in the ISBS code and the MTSA, you're required to have training, certified training, and we do that through the Maine Maritime Academy.
And we're coming to the end of the broadcast, but I want to reemphasize what you said, and that is there is a great danger as consideration is being given to the widening of the Panama Canal, that China, communist China, would step in, provide the money, and in effect make the Republic of Panama a colony of the People's Republic of China. This is something that the American media has not yet grasped. I don't think our government has fully grasped it. And Panama is essential to our security. I continue to believe that the treaties of 1978, which were enacted with the support of the Republican leadership in the Senate and the Democrat in the White House, Jimmy Carter, were enacted in order to give Panama the ability to raise the tolls and thus pay its bills to some powerful banks, Marine Midland, Chase Manhattan, and others, which wrote a great deal of money. And the canal treaties were engineered in order to get their bills paid, to the detriment of the security of the United States of America. Thank you for joining us on Conservative Roundtable. And Ed Hall, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.